I was in the middle of a long trip, exhausted and unable to keep driving. The day had long turned to night, and the deserted road seemed endless. I decided I needed to stop and rest. That's when I saw the sign for a small motel, with flickering lights barely forming the word open. It didn't look inviting, but at that moment it was enough. I arrived at the reception, where an elderly man was standing behind the counter. His gaze was empty, and he seemed completely uninterested in everything. I asked for a simple room to spend the night. He handed me the key without saying anything except, "Room 12 at the end of the hall." The hallway was poorly lit, with flickering bulbs casting dancing shadows on the peeling walls. A chill ran down my spine, but I blamed it on my fatigue. When I entered the room, I realized it was just as run down as the rest of the motel. The bed creaked at the slightest movement, the musty smell was suffocating, and the decor seemed frozen in the 1970s. But all I needed was a few hours of sleep. I lay down and tried to ignore the growing discomfort that seemed to fill the air. That's when the phone rang. The loud, sudden sound shattered the room's silence, making my heart race. I got up to answer, thinking it might be the receptionist with a message or some mistake. When I picked up the phone, all I heard was heavy breathing. It wasn't normal breathing. It was erratic, almost animalistic. "Hello?" I asked, trying to sound firm. But the breathing continued, and then the call ended. I went back to bed, trying to convince myself it was just a problem with the line or a prank call. I was about to fall asleep again when the phone rang a second time. The sound seemed even louder and more insistent. I answered, and this time I heard a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the voice was low, drawn out, like someone speaking directly into my ear. "Who is this?" I asked, but the only reply was a low, raspy laugh, followed by the sound of the line going dead. My mind started racing for explanations. Maybe it was some bored employee trying to scare me, or perhaps a technical issue. But the feeling that something was very wrong was undeniable. I decided to go to the reception and complain. When I left the room, the hallway felt different. The lighting was dimmer, and the silence was almost tangible. It felt like the air around me had grown heavier. When I reached the reception, the elderly man was still there, reading a newspaper that looked as old as he was. I explained about the calls, but he slowly raised his eyes and said, "The phone in room 12 was disconnected years ago." A chill ran through me. I tried to argue, but he continued, "No one should be calling you." I returned to the room, more suspicious than scared. I picked up the phone and tried to call the reception to prove it was working. But when I put the receiver to my ear, I heard the same heavy breathing as before, as if someone was waiting for me. I hung up immediately and sat on the bed, trying to decide what to do. That's when I noticed something. The room door was ajar. I was certain I had locked it. I stood up slowly, each step feeling like an enormous effort. As I approached the door, a cold chill ran through my body. I shut it firmly, locking it again, but the feeling that I wasn't alone in the room was inescapable. The phone rang again. This time I didn't answer, but the sound wouldn't stop. It rang incessantly, each ring sounding louder and more desperate. I covered my ears, but it felt like the sound was inside my head. Then it all stopped. The silence returned, but it wasn't normal silence. It was oppressive, as if the air was charged with something invisible. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and the phone fell off the hook by itself. The heavy breathing filled the room again, now amplified, as if it was right beside me. I looked around, but I saw no one. Then I heard a whisper, clear and terrifying. "You shouldn't be here." I grabbed my things and ran out of the room, not caring where I was going. When I got to my car, I looked up at the window of room 12. A dark figure was standing there, staring directly at me. Its eyes, or what looked like eyes, glowed in the darkness. The figure raised a hand and slowly waved goodbye. I never went back to that place. Out of morbid curiosity, I later found out that room 12 was notorious for strange incidents. The last guest registered there had mysteriously disappeared, leaving only the phone off the hook. Since that night, I can't hear the sound of a ringing phone without a cold shiver running down my spine. It was a cold, rainy night, and I was returning from a long trip. My eyes could barely stay open, and the raindrops hitting the windshield made visibility even worse. I decided to stop at a roadside motel. The neon sign flickered as if it was about to go out, and the place had an abandoned air that made me hesitate for a moment. But exhaustion won, and I went in. The receptionist was a middle-aged man with sunken eyes and a tired expression. He handed me the key without asking many questions. "Room 8, last door on the right," he said without looking directly at me. I took the key and walked down the dimly lit hallway. The walls were peeling, the carpet smelled of mold, and the sound of rain seemed to echo through the empty building. When I opened the door to the room, I was met with a slightly sour smell, like something that had been closed for too long. The room was simple. A double bed, a small nightstand with an old lamp, and a TV that looked like it was from the 90s. I was too tired to care about the appearance of the place. All I wanted was to sleep. After a quick shower, I threw myself onto the bed. The mattress was hard and creaked with every movement, but I didn't care. I turned off the lights and covered myself with the heavy blanket. The silence in the room was almost absolute, interrupted only by the sound of rain outside. I was almost asleep when I heard a faint noise, something like a scratching sound coming from under the bed. I opened my eyes, trying to listen more closely. Maybe it was just a rat or some problem with the plumbing. I ignored it and closed my eyes again, but the sound continued. It was clearer now, like nails scratching against the wood of the bed frame. A shiver ran down my spine, but I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I grabbed my phone to shine a light under the bed, but I hesitated. Something inside me said it was better not to look. The feeling that something was wrong began to grow. The sound stopped for a moment, and silence filled the room again. That's when I felt it. A slight weight on the mattress, as if someone was slowly climbing onto the bed. My heart began to race, but I stayed still, trying to think rationally. Maybe it was my imagination, fatigue playing tricks on me. Suddenly, the weight intensified, as if something was crawling toward my head. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I turned on my phone's flashlight and lit up the room. There was nothing on the bed. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and convinced myself it was just paranoia. But the relief was short-lived. When I turned off the flashlight, the room was completely dark again. And then, I felt it. Something grabbed my ankle. It wasn't a quick or accidental touch. It was a hand, cold and bony, gripping my leg tightly. My body froze in fear. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. The hand started to pull, slowly and deliberately, as if trying to drag me off the bed. I gathered all the strength I had and pulled my leg away, kicking desperately at the air. When I finally freed myself, I rolled to the side and fell to the floor. The flashlight on my phone, still on, briefly lit up the space under the bed. It was enough to see it. There was something there. It wasn't human. It was a skeletal figure with empty, glowing eyes. Its skin was so thin it looked almost transparent, and it was smiling in a disturbing way, revealing long, jagged teeth. The smile wasn't one of joy. It was predatory, as if it was enjoying my fear. I ran to the door, but it didn't open quickly enough. I felt as if something was right behind me, ready to grab me again. When I finally got out, I ran down the hallway to the reception. I was trembling, barely able to speak. The receptionist looked at me with a mix of weariness and indifference. "What happened?" he asked, as if he already knew. I tried to explain, but he just sighed and said, "Nobody's supposed to use room 8. I don't know why I still give out the key for it." I stared at him, confused. "What's in that room?" I asked, my voice shaking. He hesitated before answering. "Some say it was an accident. Others say it was something darker. A guest died there years ago. Since then, no one's been able to stay in that room without seeing things. I left the motel without grabbing my belongings, without looking back. When I reached my car, I glanced up at the window of room 8. It was completely dark, but for a brief moment, I swear I saw the same pair of glowing eyes staring at me. I never went back to that place. And to this day, whenever I tell the story, I feel as though something is still watching me, waiting for me in the darkness. It was one of those nights where everything seemed to conspire to create discomfort. The cold wind howled fiercely, like a lament, and the rain battered the road, forming puddles that reflected the dim lights of the street lamps. After hours of driving, my eyes were heavy and exhaustion was unbearable. I found a small motel, one of those forgotten by time, with a neon sign flickering irregularly. "Open," it read, but it felt more like a warning than an invitation. I parked the car and went inside. The air in there was strange, heavy, carrying the smell of things best left forgotten. The receptionist was an elderly man with rigid features and sunken eyes. He barely spoke as he handed me the key. "Room 6, he said, pointing to a dark hallway. His eyes followed me as I walked away, not with curiosity, but as if he were waiting for something to happen. The hallway was narrow, lit by flickering bulbs that cast shadows on the peeling walls. Each step echoed, amplifying the oppressive silence. I finally reached the room, and when I opened the door, I was met with a claustrophobic atmosphere. Yellowed walls, old furniture, and a bed that seemed to creak just from being looked at. A strange smell lingered in the air, a mix of mildew and something metallic. I was too tired to care. All I wanted was to rest. After a quick shower, I lay on the bed. The mattress was too firm, and the pillow felt like it was filled with rocks. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore the discomfort. The sound of the rain, once soothing, now seemed louder, almost aggressive. Gradually, I fell asleep, but my rest was interrupted by a peculiar noise. Something above me. I opened my eyes, confused. In the silence of the room, the sound was unmistakable. Footsteps. Someone was walking on the ceiling. My first thought was that it was the guest in the room above me, but I quickly remembered that the motel had no second floor. I tried to rationalize the sound. Maybe it was an animal or the branches of a tree hitting the roof. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, as if someone were pacing back and forth, dragging their feet. A chill ran down my spine, but I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "It's just my imagination," I thought, turning to my side and closing my eyes, but the footsteps didn't stop. In fact, they became more distinct now directly above me. It felt as though the ceiling was so thin I could feel the weight of each step. Annoyed and unsettled, I got up. I grabbed my phone and aimed its flashlight at the ceiling, even though I knew it was impossible to see through the wood and shingles. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, trying to shake off the growing fear. I returned to bed and tried to ignore the sound. That's when I noticed something even stranger. The room's lights began to flicker irregularly, casting shifting shadows on the walls. Every time the lights went out, the room seemed different. In the final flash before complete darkness, I swear I saw something on the ceiling. Marks, footprints, unmistakable. They were human but upside down, as if someone had been walking on the ceiling. My eyes locked onto them, unable to look away, even as the lights flickered again. I grabbed my phone and shone its flashlight on the ceiling, but now there was nothing. The marks were gone. I sat on the bed, trembling, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Then I heard something even more chilling, breathing. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. It was coming from above. My mind was racing, every fiber of my being screaming at me to leave the room. But something kept me frozen, as if an invisible force was holding me in place. Suddenly, a louder sound broke the silence, a creak like wood being strained. The ceiling began to groan as if it were about to collapse. The breathing grew louder, closer, and then I saw it. In the corner of the room, something began to take shape. I don't know how to describe it. It was a human figure, but distorted, contorted, as if it were trapped between two worlds. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, fixed on me. The figure began to move, slowly descending along the wall without making a sound. Each movement was unnatural, almost impossible, as if it were bending in ways a human body shouldn't. When it reached the floor, it stayed there motionless, just staring at me. Its eyes were empty, but they radiated something I can only describe as malice. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body wouldn't respond. The figure began to move closer, its steps light but quickening. When I finally managed to react, I ran to the door and yanked it open in desperation. I stumbled into the hallway, looking back. The room was empty, but I knew it was still there, watching me. I reached the reception desk, breathless, and the receptionist looked at me with the same apathetic expression as before. "What happened?" he asked, as if he already knew. All I could say was, "Room 6. He sighed and shook his head. "You shouldn't have stayed there. That room. It's not meant for guests." I tried to get more answers, but all he said was, "Leave. It's better that way." I went to my car without gathering my things. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced one last time at the room. The curtain on the window was open, and there it was, the figure staring at me. But it wasn't alone. There was something else on the ceiling, something I couldn't identify before I hit the gas and sped away. I never went back to that place. And to this day, I avoid looking at ceilings when I'm alone in a room, because I know that somewhere, something is still walking above me, waiting to be seen.